Hi, everybody, and welcome to another rousing conversation. This evening, we have PhDC, LICSW, CSTS, Judy on the Street, Elliott Kronenfeld. Hi, Elliott.
Hi, Lida. Mwah.
Oh, got it. um, Elliott, that's a lot of letters. Could you break those down for me? I think there's commas. Our viewers can see that. So
Right.
let's start with the PhDC.
So PhDC means I am a doctoral candidate, which means I am finishing my doctoral degree and I am in the dissertation phase. I'm doing my clinical research. I am studying men who have had an infidelity and have gone to therapy to recover from that infidelity. And I'm looking at how does the therapy impact men? And I really want to learn more about and teach the therapeutic community how to work with men better. So that's what the PhDC is. So by this time next year, the little C will fall off and it'll just be PhD.
So you can put that on everything, every airline ticket, every...
That's right. Doesn't get you much, but I can put it on everything. The LICSW means I am a licensed independent clinical social worker. And the CSTS means that I am a certified sex therapist and sex therapy supervisor. So I train other sex therapists and I help them to get certified.
Oh, good. Because I'd hate to come to your office with my, half of my hair done in a Karen way. And, I say that with love, Karens, and be like, I need to talk to the sexual supervisor.
That's right. Let me help you out with that.
Okay, so we were talking off camera, and you had mentioned that you started your schooling in the theater, but what propagated or began this turn into, I don't want to call it brain medicine. I guess it's soul medicine or psyche medicine. Like,
Yeah.
what took you into that?
Lida, it was such a long journey. I have had so many lives. I was in the Army. I know I was a leader at IBM. I owned my own consulting company. I owned a knitting company. I owned a catering company. I worked at Denny's. Like, I did all kinds of things. I worked for Massachusetts state government for a number of years. And when I was working at IBM, so I have two children. I have one through international adoption and I have one through gestational surrogacy. And when my children were very, very little, I realized that it wasn't what I said to them that would teach them, although that was part of it. But how I lived my life, how I modeled for them, my values became really important. And I realized I wasn't living my values. So when my daughter was about 2.5 months old, an infant, brand new infant, I walked into IBM and I quit my job. And oh my, lights out. Hold on.
Like you.
That was a moment. So I quit my job and all the lights went out.
IBM is always listening.
That's right. Well, what happened is I went to social work school because what I realized is that I cared more about people in human condition and human interactions than I did about widgets and technology. I didn't actually care about technology. I'm actually not very good at it. And so I went back to become a social worker. And I originally thought that I was going to work in adoption. Because having these two kids, I really wanted to work in family formation, particularly in helping gay men have children. Because when I started to have my children, there were no models of openly gay men who were creating families in this way. The gay dads that I had met had all had their kids primarily through, heterosexual union. I wasn't going to do that. Wasn't my calling. And so there weren't a lot of models for me. And when I had children, the gay community actually wasn't all that accepting of it and actually made life really hard. And I wanted to work in this area. So then I got an internship in adoption. I realized I hated it. I didn't want to do that. It wasn't the work I wanted to do. It wasn't the calling. And so when I graduated from social work school, I got a job at a surrogacy agency, the one that I had used for my daughter, that helped me have my daughter. And so I became the director of parent relations, and I spent the next couple of years traveling all over the world, helping gay men and straight folks have children through third-party reproduction. And because what most people don't realize is that IVF is not legal around the world. It's actually legal in very few countries. And the United States has the safest medical process. So a lot of people come to the US for their medical process. And so I would travel all over the world, all over the country, and I would help people to create their families through IVF and third-party reproduction. It was really rewarding. But by then my kids were getting older and they were like, why do you travel so much? And I realized I was missing the thing that I loved the most. So I did what I'm really good at. I just walked in one day and I quit.
Right, it goes back to modeling the behavior.
Right. And I opened up my own practice and I opened up my own clinic. And so I am the founder and clinical director of Insight Brookline Psychotherapy, which is one of Boston's largest group practices in Boston. We have offices in Brookline and in Newton. So I'm sitting in our Newton office tonight. And we have 25 therapists working here. And we help people with every issue from birth to death.
Now, it's important for our viewers to remember that when you're typing out psychotherapist, it's one word.
Not a psychotherapist.
Two different meanings. I was like, both of these words have value.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you to put your empath hat on for just a moment. And not your, again, disclaimer, not your professional advice hat.
Okay.
But there sure are a lot of things going on right now between quarantine and between the equal rights movement, which is like so really important. But what would be 3 pieces of advice that you would give to, it's a double question, to just a person who is navigating these times, and also what would be 3 pieces of advice you would give to somebody who is having an extremely difficult time right now, perhaps processing all of the things?
So I'm going to do that in reverse order, if that's okay. Let's start with for people who are really challenged right now. These are extraordinary times. Before we started filming, I was telling Lyda that we have never seen times like this in our practice. The level of criticality that we're seeing in folks and the level of challenge that people are going through, because it's not just living through a pandemic. There's 15 issues in there, right? It's the isolation, it's how people are putting on weight, not getting exercise. It's people who are feeling isolated. It is people who are getting exhausted by looking at Zoom all day long. Like there's so many issues in it. It's not a thing, it's so many things. And when we think about the racial tensions in our country and the election cycle and all of the pieces that are tied to that, it is, overwhelming isn't even a good enough word. I don't know what's bigger than overwhelming, but it's bigger than overwhelming. You know, and we think about things like how many people are worried about their own health and their own economics. And, you know, we have schools starting up, and school just ended. And if you have kids or you're in the process or you're a college student, how do I make sense of my life? What happens when I'm not seeing my coworkers every day? These are the people who are supposed to give me a sense of identity. And so what I would tell you, if any of this is hitting you hard, the first thing I would tell you is to breathe. Take a big deep breath in, hold it, and slowly let it out, right? Because part of this is that when we start feeling this level of tension, we stop breathing. We hold our breath, which, yeah, and our brains get constipated.
Ooh.
We get brain constipation. That's terrible because oxygen is the gas for the engine of our brain. And we hold our breath and we're not taking oxygen in, our anxiety goes up, our tension goes up. So first thing I would tell you is breathe. It's the best thing you can do. The second thing I would tell you is move your body to whatever extent you can. If that means going for a walk, if you've got a Peloton, if you go swimming, or you have a kayak, or you just sit on the floor and you do stretching, whatever it is, do yoga. But move your body because we hold all of that emotion in our body. The third thing I would tell you is if you're still struggling, make an appointment. We're here. We will talk to you. Telehealth is working beautifully. Make an appointment.
This is actually an example just for our viewers. This is what telehealth would look like. If you're like, I can't picture it, this is it. There's a therapist, there's a client, and we're having relations, and you're watching it.
That's right. This literally is what my day looks like all day long. It looks exactly like this. Right?
It's been we're gonna get to the second part of it. You know, life is about rabbit holes for me as an ADHD personality.
Yeah.
So with my therapist, the relationship has it is still cemented. I know what our relationship is, but now we both have this vocabulary that's very intimate for each other. Like, I'm like, is that a fish tank? And he's like, oh yeah, I have 5 fish. I'm like, next day I'm like, is that a cat? He's like, oh yeah, that's one of my cats. And you can like hear his husband down the hall cooking. And I'm like, he's like, is that your garden? So these, I guess what I'm saying is don't be fearful of these opportunities because as Elliott said, the helpers are out there. Just ask for help.
Yeah, and you know, the other piece that I would add to that, Lyda, is you're right, because you talk about having this very unique relationship with your therapist. I like to think I have a very special relationship with everyone I work with. You know, I think I'm a really great therapist, not for everybody. I'm a great therapist for a lot of people. And what I tell people is you have to date your therapist. Go for a couple of sessions, and if you're not feeling it, break up and go find another one.
Right.
Until you find the therapist that's right for you. Don't feel like you make one call, you get one connected, and that's who you're stuck with. You're not. I've had lots of people break up with me after 2 or 3 sessions, and you know what I say to them? Do you need a referral? Can I help you find somebody? Because if this isn't working for you, then let's get you to the right place, because that's really the work.
And we'll share at the end of this, we'll post a link. Elliott doesn't know this yet, but I'm sure he knows the website. There is some type of Massachusetts website, I think, that's like the consortium of therapists, and you can type your insurance in and type like the type of therapy you're looking for, and then do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, yes, Lyda, there's actually a few of them, right?
Great.
And I can actually give you a couple of resources that you can put up there when you post it. So we have like Psychology Today. We have zencare.co. There's a couple of places where you can really search and pull things apart, and you can really sort through. It's kind of like being on Grindr for therapy.
And you know, that's very true because there are so many different styles. It's not all just talk therapy. Your therapist may have you put headphones on and play different rhythms, and that might help your brain go into a more relaxed place to access the things you want to talk about. Or maybe you're drawing with both hands while you're talking. There's so many different flavors of therapy.
Well, yes, and we all have our own specialties, right? I'm a sex therapist, right? So everything I talk about sex all day long because that's I know, right? And it's really fun saying that at a cocktail party. But there are so there's a lot of things I don't do, right? I don't do, like, I will work with, addiction if it's related to sexuality, identity, but like I don't do heavy addiction work.
Right.
I deal with sexual trauma, but I don't do heavy trauma work. Right? What I would do is I would have you go see somebody else for that part.
Wow. So we were talking before we went live, and what we were talking about was it's some type of month, right? It's not just June. What month
That's
is
right. The great thing about June is that it's Men's Sexual Health Month.
what?
I know. Men have a sexual health month. We get to talk about men and sex all month. We only have a couple of days left. We got to pack it in.
That's what my boyfriends do. Is
It's a little bit of a double entendre, right?
um, so what does so your specialty is men's sexual health, but what does sexual health mean to you? What is that? Can you, like, what's your we're in an elevator, I'm getting off in 30 seconds. Describe to me sexual health.
So I love, this is a question I ask all my clients, so I'm really glad you asked me. Because I always say, what is healthy sexuality? Which is different. Healthy sexuality is when you feel fully embodied, you feel fully engaged, you feel safe, and you feel consensual, and you're really living your authentic self.
Mm.
That would be healthy sexuality, way up here. But when we start to break it down and we look at the component parts of it, it's actually far more complicated. Part of it is because, as men, and let's talk about gender for a second, right? Because gender is a social construct. It's not a biological function. I just want to be really clear that people who are watching this know that we're not necessarily talking about people with penises. Right? That men is a social construct. And even if we were only talking about people with penises, we know that what it takes to be a man in Saudi Arabia is very different than what it takes to be a man in Sweden versus what it takes to be a man in Brazil or what it takes to be a man in the South End. Right? So that's how we know gender is a social construct, because there's no one universal definition of man or man's behaviors. What's interesting is that men are raised with some really core messages and these scripts that we're given, right? And these scripts that we're given are given to us from the moment we are born. So the moment you take your first breath and the doctor looks between your legs and says, "It's a boy," that very second, you are imbued upon with all of the historical narrative of all of your ancestors and all of the expectations of what is supposed to happen in your life based on your family's race, your family's economics, your family's education, your family's political leanings, your family's immigration story, your family's geography, your birth order, all of those factors and so many more. From the moment you take your first breath, your road has been laid out in front of you. And you have to spend the rest of your life determining whether or not you're going to live by that script or not. And for so many of us, the script doesn't fit, right? Like, it feels, there's something about it that seems familiar. It's like we do Shakespeare, right? We all know we're doing Shakespeare because we're all wearing pumpkin pants and we look sexy doing it, right? The set looks right. The language, I get the iambic pentameter, except everybody's doing Romeo and Juliet and I'm doing Twelfth Night. Something feels a little off.
Right. Oh, God.
Right? And we know that. And so we spend the rest of our lives really trying to figure out, how am I going to edit my script? And so some of those there's so many scripts, right? Thousands of scripts about who we're supposed to be. Men are supposed to be providers and fixers, and men are supposed to be horny but never needy. There's that script. They're always supposed to be horny but never needy. And when we learn, we don't get taught about sex and we don't get taught about our bodies. So we learn about sex from porn, which means that our dicks are all supposed to be 8.5 inches, hard in an instant. We're supposed to come buckets and last forever. And we're supposed to bring passion the minute we touch somebody. That's not really how sex works.
That sounds like a lot of performance anxiety.
A lot of performance anxiety.
That's a lot.
Right.
That's a lot to put on. That's a lot of costume to wear just to have a basic mammalian or animal experience, right? Just to have a basic human experience. That's a lot of clothes to have to put on. I interrupted. Continue.
Yeah, no, but Lida, that's exactly the problem, right? And so if you're realizing that the outfit doesn't fit, right? If you don't get erections the way you wanted to, or, you have trouble ejaculating, or you ejaculate too soon, or you actually don't want to have sex, or you don't know how to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, as men, know how to talk about this. And what's the shame is the reason why Men's Sexual Health Month is so very important, is because doctors, for the most part, now we have some really great doctors and props to all of them, but a good majority of doctors don't know how to talk to their patients about sex. They don't ask about sex. They don't ask if sex is good. They don't ask if sex is working. The most they'll do is check the prostate, but they never even teach men what a prostate is or why it's important. They just say you don't want it to be enlarged. Right?
Right.
Yeah, so June is about teaching men about their own sexual health and getting them to be curious about their own bodies and their own experiences, and getting them to be okay, be comfortable asking the questions. And so that means, like, if we go back to the first question you asked, right, which is some of the advice that I would give just in general to people living in this crazy world and the pandemic, and the racial tensions that we're living under, and then of course for me, I always want to bring everything back to sex because why not? The advice is all still the same. Number one, be curious. Curiosity is the thing that pushes us forward. Don't assume you know everything. Number two, go educate yourself. Learn how to ask a question. Ask a doctor, read a book, listen to a podcast, go get information.
Mm-hmm.
And then three, which I think is the most important thing, learn how to question your own scripts. If it's not working for you, know that you have the freedom and the permission to edit your own script. This life is about you, and you can't waste a minute of it.
Mm-hmm. That is, not only is that a motto of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, but before I found them, before I stumbled into this life 7 years ago, it was already, I call that, for me, that's magic. Knowing and I'll explain it, knowing that, and take everything I say within a grain of salt, but that society is a construct and it is a contract, and we don't necessarily know we're signing it throughout our life. We sign it, we re-sign it.
Right.
And I say, screw the contract, screw the coloring book. I'm going to be over on the other side of the wall drawing a mural, because that's, my energy does not fit within the 90 percentile of what we've been told is correct or upstanding or mild mannered or well behaved. There is magic in that. So I'm really glad that you've said those things, because part of our mission in the Sisters is to expiate stigmatic guilt and promulgate universal joy, which is already a really big sentence to say, especially if you're in a nightclub. But
Right.
it's even harder to digest. I think it can take years You know, thankfully that is a very hardy seed. That concept is a seed that you could put in a desert and it will flower eventually. But you know, I can say to somebody, I expiate your stigmatic guilt and I hope that you find joy perpetually in your life. And it might take them 4.5 years before that comes rushing back into the forefront of their brain and they go, oh, that's what that meant. Like, I don't waste your time. Do, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, do what makes you happy. And, you know, that's really all we're here for, I think, is to experience joy.
You know, Lida, I think that's so important, and I think that's what we've been talking about in this social discourse over the last couple of weeks, right? The problem is for some people, the social contract doesn't allow them to make those kinds of choices. And that's where we get stuck, right? And that's where you know, that's why we're seeing protests. That's why we're seeing people pushing. That's why Black Lives Matter is so important, because sometimes the social contracts that you talk about don't allow you to live your magic. And what we have to do is realize, and that's where privilege comes in, right? And I explained to my children that privilege, in the simplest way, because I needed to put it in an age-appropriate way, is that privilege is the freedom to not care, right? It's the freedom to not care. I don't have to care if I'm driving late at night. I don't have to care if I'm walking through the mall in a basketball jersey because I'm not going to get followed. I don't have to worry if I'm alone on the tee at 10 o'clock because nobody's going to approach me. I don't have to worry about if I'm wearing a hoodie with my hood up because I'm cold, right? So privilege is the freedom to not to care. And one of the things, and one of the reasons why I'm studying men is because, you know, part of the social contract that you talk about, and I hope this doesn't go too deep. If it does, you can pull me back, is that we talk about men and privilege as the foundation that everything else is measured against, particularly white men, right? Men of color have a very different position in this game, and we know that. But particularly with white men, particularly cis white men, particularly straight cis white men. And we see them as the epitome of privilege. But the problem is nobody actually really studies them. We think we know all about them, and very few people actually dig into what their experience is. And I think that part of this, being able to live your magic, is that for this group of men, they don't know how to live their magic because nobody's taught them. And one of the reasons why they hold on to some of these really ineffective and, quite frankly, harmful narratives is because that's what they were told they were supposed to do. And it's really challenging because it seems, for everyone else, it seems like a very easy concept. Don't be an asshole. Like, don't put your knee on somebody's neck. This seems like an easy concept. And I'm not making excuses for them, because I think that when it's wrong, it's wrong. But part of this is that there is part of this engagement that we actually have to learn. You know, this doesn't start when somebody's 25 years old. This starts with how we raise young boys. It starts when they're very, very, very young. It starts when we give them the script. And if we don't teach them to live their magic, because there's a lot of cisgendered, hetero, straight, white guys that, quite frankly, would love to be able to edit their script. They don't know they're supposed to. They don't know that they can.
Yeah, they don't even know they can. That's So hold on, I'm gonna tag in for just a moment. So viewers, the important thing here is that, from my opinion, and I, you know, don't trust me, I'm just a drag clown nun. But the hard work now is not just rewriting your script, but making sure that you're creating space, not imposing, but creating space and opportunity for others to rewrite their scripts. But you also have to change your narrative around others. If you're walking down the street, like there's so many things we have to defuse, right? Even in the Me Too movement, all people should be able to walk down the street at night and not have to cross the street because they're afraid of somebody else. So when that wells up in you, investigate it, because that's a narrative. It may not be the narrative that is part of your story, but it affects somebody else's story. And the privilege is being able to ignore that, is to go, oh, I'm just going to cross the street because this is what I'm supposed to do. No, you're not. Say hello. Like, try being surprised.
Well, I think that I agree with that 100%. What I would add on to that is, for the men who would love to change their script but don't know they can, is, first of all, take a breath, let it out slowly, go make an appointment, and learn that you can change your script. There's some really interesting reading. If anyone wants to read about this, Michael Kimmel is a sociological researcher who wrote the book Angry White Men. And he has a number of books that really looks at how this phenomenon of the angry white man starts at boyhood. And it's some really interesting reading. And it really talks about how the messages we get in this country around our masculinity really are about holding our masculinity. But then we're also told that we're not supposed to hold our masculinity, and we're supposed to make room for others, but we're supposed to hold on to our position. Like, the messages are very confusing. And so when the message is confusing and we don't know what to do, then we operate from a place of either confusion or fear, and change becomes really difficult. And the truth is, it is my belief, and I know there are a lot of viewers out there who would disagree with me, so I'll take that. You can send me the hate letters. But I think that I don't think there's anyone in the world who wakes up and says, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to be a really hateful and awful person. I just don't believe that people do that. I'd like to believe the best in people. Now, I do think people do hateful and awful things, but part of it, I think it's because that's what they were brought up to believe. That's what they have picked up either from their own hurts and their own traumas and their own feelings of being less than or being disenfranchised, or literally this is the script they have been given. But I don't think anyone intentionally wakes up and says, I'm going to actually make things hell today because I want to do that, because I want to wreak havoc. That is always the result of something traumatic. That is always the result of something that went awry. Because as human beings, we have 5 core human drives that propel us forward. Hunger, right? Make yourself a sandwich, right? Thirst, you all look well hydrated, good for you. Affiliation. We are pack animals. We have to be connected to others. It is in our DNA that we have to be a part of a community. We don't live in caves by ourselves. 4th, pain avoidance. Emotional pain and physical pain. We will do anything to avoid pain. Mm-hmm. If it's physical pain, we will do anything to avoid physical pain. If it's emotional pain, I will do anything to get away from it, to mask it, to deny it, to bury it. We don't want to deal with our pain. And 5th, libido. The sex drive. The things that propel us forward. Now, what ends up happening is that most people, not everybody, but most people can feed themselves and hydrate themselves. For some people, that's a real challenge. They're not eating and they're not getting the nutrition they need. And that puts people into a place of desperation. For those that aren't food or nutrition challenged. When we're talking about the rest of this, when we talk about sex, when we talk about intimacy, when we talk about what's going on in the world, we're talking about affiliation, our need to connect with others, how we're dealing with the pain that we feel, and the libidinal piece, which, by the way, is not just about sex, right? Libido is about the alchemy of chemicals that run through our bodies and drive us. And it can drive so many things, but it drives the way we go towards somebody or go away from somebody. And it's all this, quite frankly, stew pot of chemicals in our body, right? And so these 5 core drives is what determine whether or not we can effectively deal with our own scripts once we realize that we can do magic, as Lyda, you say.
Ooh. Okay.
That's a lot.
I know. It's okay. Guys, take a breath. So, I want to ask you, in this past week, have you done anything that you regret, and have you done anything that you're proud of?
Oh, that's every week. Oh, absolutely. Something I regret. Yeah, I think that I approached my kids on something that, quite frankly, I wasn't very effective at. And, my daughter was, as a 14-year-old was very clear in telling me that I was not very good at what I was doing. Lyda, I believe you've met her. She's
Good job equipping her with the skills to adequately inform you.
Oh, she gave me the tea, and I deeply regretted that. And I thought, well, I'll save money for therapy. But things that I'm proud of, yeah, I think that I wake up every single day and I say, how can I be the best person I can be today? And, every day I try to do something. I like to think of myself as fairly informed, but I know that there's so much more for me to learn. So, this week I've been doing a lot of reading on critical race theory because I don't take my privilege for granted. And, I've been doing a lot of work on my dissertation and working with the pain men feel after they've had an infidelity, right? And realizing that, just because they've done this act and they've caused some pain in their relationship, that they also feel pain. And so working with them to help them alleviate their pain, for me, makes me feel really good.
Yeah, pain and guilt.
Oh, yeah.
The guilt is the pain, but it's what you labeling that for me, naming guilt is so important because I don't think people necessarily. Guilt is this weird thing that we're taught in society through different religions and different upbringings, right? So we're hit with guilt from different angles, right? Like God is disappointed in you, or I, your mother, am disappointed with you. And God is like, how do I relate to God? But to mom, I can relate to that. And mom and dad are like the first two granite foundations of they will inform everything about how we go out and make friendships, love connections, how open we are. And so when an infidelity, at least in my past, before I learned how to have communication, right, with a partner and be like, listen, for me, and this is not for everybody, but for me, I go, maybe you're going to be the person who I grow old with, but I don't expect you to be my everything. And if you're okay with that, then let's write let's make an agreement, and we'll come back to that agreement time after time after time and say, does this serve us? But you have to you don't have to, but it creates a very good foundation if you communicate and recommunicate from the beginning onward, so that you know what an infidelity is, so that you know what to chew yourself up over and what to. Hopefully, I'm not undermining your talk.
No, you're spot on, Lida. You're absolutely spot on, because it's guilt and shame, right? And we have to understand the difference between the two of them. So guilt is about what I did. Shame is about who I am,
Oh yeah,
right?
but
I
there's
screwed up. I am a screw up, right?
yeah.
I had an infidelity. I am an infidel, right? And so separating the difference between guilt and shame, because we deal with them differently. Now, it's interesting, this thing about infidelity, because infidelity comes from the word fidelity. Fidelity means trust. So an infidelity is anything that breaks the trust, right? It doesn't have to be sexual. There's all kinds of infidelity. There's financial infidelity, there's social infidelity, there's physical infidelity, which is different than sexual infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
There is spiritual infidelity or familial infidelity, but it's anything that breaks the trust. But when we get into what I hope are mature adult relationships, the truth is that we never take a moment to actually define, what do we mean by monogamy, if that's what we're going to have. And what I've noticed in my practice is, in this generation, so many, God, I'm going to sound so old, younger people, right? I'm the end of the baby boomers, so I'm a baby boomer, right? So just hold that for a second. But people who are generations younger than me and come into my practice, they talk a lot about how the social expectation now is that everyone's supposed to be polyamorous, everyone is supposed to be some form of either gender non-conforming, everyone has to be, they have all these new kinds of scripts that are coming in, which are very different than the scripts of my generation. And so when somebody says, but I don't want to be polyamorous, and I want to be monogamous, and I don't want to be gender non-conforming, they actually start to feel bad about it, because they feel like they're being counter to what their generation is telling them they should. It's still the same problem, but turned up on its head.
Like reverse, the hourglass is tipped.
Right.
You're not progressive enough.
You're not progressive enough, right? Or you're hung up, or you're too conservative. A blowjob is just a blowjob. What's the problem? Why can't we have an open relationship? And I help couples negotiate open relationship contracts all the time. I think open relationships can work beautifully for some couples, but not for all couples, for lots of reasons, right? And so, this piece that you're talking about the monogamy, is that infidelity happens in really good relationships. And infidelity doesn't mean that it's a bad relationship or that you're a bad person. But infidelity sometimes can happen in the very best of relationships. The question is, what are we going to do about it, and how are we going to work through it?
Correct. Cool. So, what scares you?
Oh, it's interesting. That's a good question, Lida. People that know me would say that nothing scares me. I am by nature a pretty bold person, and I will take any challenge and run with it. But the truth is, there's a lot that scares me. I am afraid that when all is said and done, I wasn't a good enough father. That, did I give my kids enough? Did I teach them enough? Did I model enough? Could I have done more? Should I have done more? Could I have done less? Should I have done less? Did I parent well enough? And the truth is, I may never know. That scares me. I think on some level, aging scares me, right? I'm looking down the barrel at 60.
That's a script. Wait, what?
Yeah, I'm in my late 50s. So 60 is right around, not far around. I know, right? Good genetics.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and, I think about, and I feel the aging in my body. And, talking about Men's Sexual Health Month, um, I think we need to talk about those things. As men age sexually, things change. We don't perform the same way. Our bodies don't respond the same way. We don't react the same way. Things don't feel the same way. Our relationship to our bodies, what it takes to run our bodies, and how we use our bodies in relationship with others is all different. And I think that, luckily I have an amazing, loving partner. We've been together for a very long time, and, we're in the same age cohort. And, luckily we have a relationship where we can talk about those things. And I'm watching him age and he's watching me age. But sometimes aging can be really scary. I think about, will I be alive to see my grandchildren, and will I be capable? And, there are so many things I still want to do in my life. Will I be vital long enough to do them? Right? That stuff scares me. It's that kind of existential crisis stuff. And one of the things that I have been paying attention to lately, and I hope this comes across as a statement of gratitude, because it really is meant as gratitude, is, did I use my privilege well enough? Because I think I haven't. And I'm trying to be better at it every day. But I think for too long, for too many years, I took my privilege for granted. And, I certainly started paying attention to this long before the tragedy of George Floyd. But I still think it took me too long to wake up and realize, how gifted I am. For a long time I thought, well, as a gay man, I have my persecution. But the truth is, I've actually never been persecuted as a gay man. Not ever. Nobody has ever said anything negative to me. My family has accepted me. I've never lost a job. So nothing has ever happened to me personally. When I was a young gayby, I grew up in the AIDS crisis. And that was scary. That scared me a lot. And it felt really good to be really passionate about the fight and making quilts and cooking meals and doing die-ins on the State House lawn and, doing those kinds of real activist things. But for me, it was important and I was really passionate about it. But what I realize now is that I personally never felt persecuted. I felt in community with my people. And when I finally woke up one day and I said, you know what, I've actually never been persecuted, my privilege hit me like a dump truck. And I thought, damn, why couldn't I have learned this earlier? But we learn when we learn. We wake up when we wake up.
I have a response. So for our viewers, Elliott has been a friend of the sisters probably longer than I know, but for my recollection, at least 2 years now, or in some fashion, which we are eternally grateful for. But I got to spend 4 or 6 hours in a professional development class with Elliott. Elliott, your children spend a lifetime with you. So in that 6-hour course, there was a lot that changed me in the moment, and I'm not sure what I've landslided or backfilled back in, but the one thing that I've taken away is you talked about how you would relate to your children or how you might relate to your partner, especially when somebody is hot-headed.
Mm-hmm.
And that story has pivoted my personal narrative, because now I'm like, I find myself in moments and I'm like, girl, you need to just, and I go, hey, Sam, I need to walk away. I might need to walk away for 5 minutes. I might need to walk away for the rest of the night. But you don't deserve the amount of energy that's about to come your way. It's not going to be fair to you, and I can't control it. So let me go, think about what I own, think about what you own, be mad for a while. And then once I'm on the other side of mad, there's going to be rationality. And we can work on rationality, but we can't work in anger. So if you helped a drag clown nun with that, you are more, I can promise you, you are more than enough. You are an adequate. We'll start there. You are an adequate father.
Lida, this is why I love you. Thank you. I needed that.
Just saying. Just, you can book Elliott. Just check your insurance. Go with things. We're going to share the links at the end of the program. So we have about, I'd say, 10 more minutes of time with each other. And you, oh God, you said you're like the Marianas Trench of deep thinking. I was like, what scares you? And usually people are like spiders, and you're like, here are 4 heavy topical things that also scare me. So, good God.
Lida, can I ask you a question?
Hold on. Your privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Your privilege. Girl, it doesn't matter that it's taken you 55, 57, 56, 59 years to become aware of your privilege, okay? The narrative changes now. Time's up. And by nature of your stature and your position in community, you know, I'm not sure yet if you're willing to take the feather of elder or the, and I mean that not as you know, not but people have to point the way, and that might be the youth, but for every pod of the human experience, right? Because we are pack animals. So we might pack as queers. We might pack as queers within a generation. We might pack within queers within a generation within 5 years, plus or minus. So where you're at in your position, aware of your privilege and saying, how am I wielding this? How am I wearing it? How am I demonstrating my privilege? Those are the right questions. There is never a wrong time to ask the right questions. So, I mean, at least you haven't died not experiencing and being conscious of your privilege and the fact that it affects others. Now, I cut you off, and I do apologize. What were you?
No, I was going to say, you know, because part of it is we wake up every single day and we make a choice, right? And it's about living intentionally. That's what we're talking about here, right? Is to live intentionally and not to live by default. You know, and one of the reasons, you know, you talk about my work with the sisters, I adore the sisters, every one of them. There's not a sister that I don't love spending time with. They inspire me, they energize me, and they give me such insight. Every single time I'm with the sisters, I walk away feeling like $1 million. There's something about the work that you all do. And so part of this is that, you know, if we wake up, the question I have for you is if we wake up every single day and we make a choice, you know, in this living intentionally and living our true selves, can you tell us about your decision to become a sister? Like when you woke up and you're like, I'm going to make this choice. I am going to manifest the way I use my privilege in this stunningly beautiful way, and I'm going to use this as my platform. How did you make a choice?
First of all, good question. Second of all, sisters are inherently just a reflection of the beauty of our community. So when you compliment me, I want to make sure that you understand that you're actually complimenting yourself. because we can't do what we do without community. We are you. Um, so the most concise answer to that question, I believe that there was always a seed of wokeness. When I was in grade school, between grades 1 and 5, there was a famine in Africa. So we're talking like 86, so somewhere between 86 and 94. There was this huge like food blight, or at least that was how media portrayed it to us. And I was like, we need to start a canned food drive to send food. And then the roadblocks went up. Like, well, what are you going to do once you get it? How are you going to postmark the food? And I was like, shouldn't we all be on board with this? So I think I was raised or I stumbled in my life onto this secret that I held. And you know, when The Secret itself came out, the book, I was like, stop telling everybody. No, which is that's the wrong way, because there's enough energy in the universe for everybody, and then some. The universe will never run out of energy. And so Elliott, I don't know any other way. I don't know how to not be this way. All I know is that I want to help, and I'm not going to get it right every time, but I'm not going to stop shouting for the communities that I think are underrepresented. And that's not like white saviorism. I mean, like, when you see the folks outside of Boston Medical Center, you know, like on the street, you see those folks and you go, one of those people might just need a hug today, and like someone to look them in the eyes. There's so much life to experience, and what do I gain by shutting myself off? And so no matter how much it might hurt or frighten me or be uncomfortable, I'm going to continue to break my heart open, so that when I skid into my grave sideways on fire with an oil streak behind me, I can go to whatever is next, knowing that I experienced and that I helped.
I love hearing you say this, Lida. You know, one of the things that I really love is when I open up Facebook and I see you having one of these conversations with people. And, you know, I love that you're going to burn the oil, use every drop of it. And, you know, every time I see it, who knows who you're going to be talking to, right? And sometimes I'm like, I don't know who Lida's talking to, but I'm going to pay attention. And the fact that you are consistently showing up in community at a time when we really need it, I think speaks so much about this part of I can't help it. It's who I am. And, you know, if ever we have needed these types of conversations, now is the time. And I'm just really thankful that you are in our community.
Well, honey, likewise. That is reciprocal.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can people find out more about you?
So I published a book. It was an Amazon #1 in its category. It's a good book. It's called Couples by Intention, Creating and Cultivating Relationships That Matter. And you can visit it on my webpage, couplesbyintention.com. And there's a great blog on there that talks about a lot of relationship things, very short blogs, the things that might help you in relationship to others. I did a TEDx talk, and that's on there. And so there's a lot of really good, valuable information on couplesbyintention.com. That's probably the best way to reach me.
Fabulous. Well, Elliott, it was a privilege and an honor and also like an extra bonus therapy session that I didn't know I was um, down with you. And I want to let you know that you're not a Leo, right? What are you?
Pisces.
Pisces. Girl, you got this, like, you have this energy that says, you might be on the top center of the triangle. I'm not sure where you fall on the triangle, but you've got an energy that says, I'm here, I'm listening, and I've seen some shit. And like that's worth its weight in gold. So I want to thank you for taking this past hour to visit with myself and everybody else who's watching.
Lyda, I will talk to you on any day.
Careful.
Thank you. I love my time with you always. Thank you.
So we're going to end the transmission. We're going to say good night, be well, and you're perfect just the way you are.
Just the way you are.